Rob, are you there?
I am indeed. How are you?
Thank you very much for a great talk. We had at a point more than 700 participants, so this is going to be a very interesting session. So this is my first time doing this type of using this type of format. So we'll go first to the questions, and then I think this screen is filling up very quickly, so I'll try to do my best. And I think I'll start with a question that was posted by Janine Cavender-Bars. She says, "Thank you for this outstanding synthesis and call to action. My question, it is easy to consider working towards a sustainable atmosphere as a separate issue from equity in human social systems. Yet, just as you clarified, that the carbon problem can be solved by planting monoculture plantations without considering biodiversity and water use, it seems equality, inclusivity, and meeting human needs across the globe are not separate issues from restoring the atmosphere. What are the ways in which you see these issues as inextricably linked? How do inequities interfere with restoring the atmosphere? In what ways do increasing equity and meeting human needs contribute to solving climate change, both within the US and across the globe?" That's not an easy one.
That's an important one. That's a great place to start. So thanks, Janine, for the question. I'm going to, when I finish, I'm going to turn it around and ask Osvaldo to comment as well, because he has, exhibited great leadership for ESA in internationalizing our society, and also particularly bringing in representation from Latin American countries. So I'll prepare you for that, Osvaldo, in a second. I'm going to try to address or acknowledge this issue several times in my talk. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to all climate solutions, and there can't be sustained and sustainable solutions without greater input and equity from people. To start with the obvious, wealthier countries, wealthier people are responsible for most of the pollution in our air. Poorer people bear the brunt, the cost of that pollution, whether it be flooding in Bangladesh or flooding today in North Carolina, whether it be the cost of living near freeways or downwind of coal plants and refineries, watching their children suffer from asthma. The two biggest killers for air pollution in the United States today are cars and coal. 100,000 Americans or more, millions of people worldwide. So it doesn't have to be this way. But it isn't just about equity, it's also about solutions. Our solutions will be stronger when we incorporate diverse viewpoints and knowledge. Our proposals are more likely to succeed with diverse input and trust. And I really enjoyed the diversity and inclusion panel yesterday that Pam Templar moderated, and there was something that quote that caught my eye. James Radcliffe said something like, "Progress happens at the speed of trust." And I really like that, and we need greater trust in climate solutions today. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Osvaldo.
Oh, that's very interesting, and how it is important to include different perspectives, because different people have different priorities, and we need to recognize. And I'll draw from one of my courses where I teach about the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them, and we were reading all the different, in some of them, almost 15 of them show progress. And however, my students focus on the two that were mostly climate change related, and that made me think a lot. Why is that different people show different interest? And I think that they are not naturally affected by the things that all the first 15, like child mortality. Child mortality is an important issue in Africa, but it's not an important issue among my students. So I think we need to get in everybody's shoes in order to solve this issue. It's not just an issue that can be solved only from the point of view of the US, Europe, China, and we need to work together, but it's not easy.
Agreed.
So I have another question here that is also very different. This is it's from Courtney Courier. She says, excellent talk, Rob. Your poem, Migration, is beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with us. How can the arts and humanities contribute to achieving your goal of restoring the atmosphere?
Thanks for the question, Courtney. And I'd like to point out too, for others listening, that Courtney has a session on art and science on Thursday. I believe it's an insight session. I was looking at the agenda yesterday, so I'd encourage people to attend that. And also, there are a number of other art, science talks and activities at this conference. I think creating art makes us human. Creating science makes us human too. It's a way of seeing, of understanding, of representing the world around us. So I believe we need art in our lives. I also believe that art makes me a better scientist, a better researcher, a better teacher, a better communicator. You know, the two forms that I'm drawn to in particular are poetry and photography. I write and read poetry compulsively and have for many years. I'm also really drawn to photography, black and white photography in particular. And I love the way that they help me see the world differently, and the way that photography tells a story. And in the very opening slide of my talk, there was a picture I took from a helicopter of a fracking site in Pennsylvania. It was published in USA Today with a story about our work. And you're looking down at that site, at the trucks, the industrial activity, the tanks, the pumps. And then in the background is this house. And it's a farmhouse where a family lives, and you realize it and think, oh my gosh, someone lives next to that. You know, do they own their lands? Are they getting royalties for that activity on their land? Were mineral rights severed years ago from surface rights? So someone else might be getting the royalties on that land. So everything in a way is captured in an image, or at least that's my hope in a photograph like that, and can tell a story more quickly and perhaps more powerfully. But science tells stories too in our papers, and I think that's important to remember.
So thank you, Rob. I think that's your talk shows is brought that to this intersection between the humanities and science that we don't find very often here at ESA or at many scientific societies. So thank you very much. I think it made us all think, and how is that happening? So
just to jump in, Osvaldo, there's a long list of people in ESA who I could mention who are passionate about the art science link. So thank you for that. But I'd like to say that it's a strong thread in our society, and I believe in that thread.
Yeah, I always remember the Nick and Terry Chapin playing music, and was always wonderful. And that was, and there was a large group of us always surrounding them and being grateful for all the things that brought to ESA. So thank you. Then there's a question that it seems to be coming to the top. It says the temporary reduction in CO2 due to COVID was astounding. Agree that we probably can't ask everybody to stay home, but do you think there will be long-term behavioral changes? For example, do you think these virtual conferences will continue over the next few years in an effort to reduce the carbon footprint associated with travel?
Yeah, great question. I do think there will be and could be systematic changes. And I think that the COVID has shown us a couple of things. It showed us that, you know, we can reduce emissions temporarily, but it's not the way we want to do it. And they've come back really quickly. We need systematic change in our emissions, and personal agency is important, but the system needs to change as well. I think the greatest illustration is on transportation. That's apparent for everyone, the clear skies we had, the fact that we're having this meeting virtually, which is something that ESA would never have done without all of us being pushed in this direction. I mean, I get Zoom fatigue, as all of you do too, but you know, we're seeing some benefits from this. It's much easier to interact with our international colleagues. It doesn't matter whether somebody's a block away or 10,000 miles away around the world. In Australia and New Zealand, they can communicate, we can talk in the same way using the same platform. So I'm really excited about that possibility. I'm excited about the way cities are taking this opportunity to reimagine mobility and transportation. There are cities from Oakland to Seattle to Milan that are closing roads permanently, opening them to bicycles, to pedestrians. And we looked at incredibly clean air and thought, you know, it's amazing, but we could have that every day just by coupling electric cars to green energy. We don't have to shelter at home and force people to stay locked away. Every day we could have that and save lives while we're doing it. Commuting may be different. People may be less willing to sit in traffic. On the other hand, will we be afraid to get on mass transit? Will people be less likely to take the subway or the bus or the train? If people are only going into work 3 days a week, will they be more willing to drive 50 miles a day when they do? So I think the simple narrative of less commuting will save emissions, I think, is true. But longer term, there are these other feedbacks that come into play, and they're not quite so clear to me. But I think mobility and transportation is where I really see COVID changing us today.
Thank you. So Betsy had a question that it seems to be very popular. She says, I'm curious what you think about animal agriculture. Cattle produce methane through fermentation, but cattle grazing has benefit through protection and maintenance of grasslands, and cattle grazing can stimulate soil carbon sequestration. Where would we get the most bang for our buck in reducing methane emissions? Do you think it would be through agriculture or other sectors?
The two big sectors, as I mentioned in my talk, and thanks for the question, are agriculture and fossil fuels. And it might surprise a few people perhaps to know that the agricultural sector has roughly twice the emissions that the oil and gas and coal sector does. And the biggest sources in agriculture are ruminants, cattle, sheep, goats. There are more than 1 billion cows, more than 1 billion sheep on the planet today, half a billion goats. And rice farming, rice paddies produce methane the same way that wetlands do. I'm actually a little more, I guess I view agricultural emissions as harder to decarbonize, even harder than energy sector emissions. It's not so hard for me to see, the power plants, I think we're getting there. We have a long way to go, but you can see that pathway. You can at least see a pathway to decarbonizing transportation through electric vehicles, through hydrogen, whatever perhaps combination of technologies that may be. And we got to get rid of the industrial smelting, the energy intensive industries. But boy, agriculture is hard, right? I mean, most nitrous oxide emissions simply come from fertilizer application. For cattle, we can reduce meat consumption, obviously, but there are still people around the world who need more protein, not less, people living in energy poverty. There are studies underway to use feed supplements, just adding small amounts of algae or oils to cattle feed that reduces the methane emissions that come out. Europe, for instance, has put in place policies to manage manure waste differently. So not allowing people to just sort of stack them up in a giant moist pile that generates methane, but to spread them out, dry them out, simple things like that. So I really do believe that in agriculture, there's a lot that we can do. I also think that it's difficult to see getting to zero emissions in the food production sector. This is one of the reasons I have begrudgingly come to accept that we need and will need some sort of negative emissions, reducing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So that's a long answer to the question, perhaps, but those are a few of my thoughts.
I have a very question here. It says, do natural grazing animals produce as much methane as those in CAFOs? How did the million of bison pre-industrial affect methane?
We have some experts who would probably be better to defer that question to in the society. My sense is that emissions are greater in a CAFO, in a concentrated animal kind of environment, less so in natural systems. The manure example is a good one. That in natural systems you're not stacking manure up, but all cattle do produce methane emissions because of that anaerobic low oxygen kind of bioreactor environment in their guts that allows the microbes to break down hard to digest compounds. So I think, and I think grazing also has some other benefits for, for diversity and weed control and things like that. But, there's a cost to our focus on red meat as well.
Yeah, here we have David Lodge, who has a different question. It says, I see why solar radiation management doesn't fit within your operational definition of restoration, and your focus on restoration is inspirational and constructive. Thank you for that. But do you see a place for SRM, at least exploring its feasibility as a stopgap approach to reduce some of the impacts of climate change?
Yeah, thanks, David. So for those of you who might not know or be familiar with solar radiation management, this is the concept of, I guess, most commonly presented blasting dust particles high into the stratosphere in the way to mimic what a volcano does. The largest volcanoes, erupt, lift particles high into the atmosphere, and Mount Pinatubo cooled the Earth for a degree Fahrenheit for a year or more. So we do know that this is possible. I'm not at the point where I'm willing to rule anything out. I have grave concerns about things like solar radiation management, and those concerns arise less from the technology and more from the social dynamic and the consensus. I mean, the United Nations is having a hard time governing now. Look at our relationship to the UN here in the United States. And yet we have to envision that somewhere, unless it's done unilaterally, there will be an international group of people doing this. That will be hard to build a consensus for atmospheric control. So I think for many of these factors, including some removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, negative emissions, the social factors are every bit, in some cases, more important than the technological factors. What we may be able to do is not necessarily what we will be able to do.
Yeah, all these solar practices will have winners and losers too. It's not going to be winners for everybody. So we have to put them all around the table.
I think maybe just to jump back in, there have been concerns raised about chemistry and ozone depletion, and I think done wrong, it could indeed do that. I think that will be studied, and you can shut it off quickly. The particles fall within a year or so. I mean, I guess the one scenario I think a little bit about is I look at the Arctic, perhaps the Antarctic, and imagine, is there a scenario in the future where the world might decide to try and protect Arctic sea ice temporarily just by releasing the particles, at the top and bottom of the Earth, where global warming has been the greatest. I'm not advocating that solution by any means, but we're heading to a place where the proper comparison isn't solar radiation management versus today. It's solar radiation management or everything else we want to do in a world 25, 50 years from now that really may be going awry. So we have to think about what the options are. I hope that's not one we need to use, but who knows?
Thank you. Rob, I think Caroline has here a question that seems to be very popular. She says, restoring the atmosphere will create winners and losers, and I'm willing to bet the losers, oil and gas industry and agriculture, will have much louder voices and object. How can we lift up the voice of the winners?
So with the first part of the question, and sorry, I'm having a hard time keeping up with the chat.
Yeah,
a lot of points. But the losers, so the oil and gas industry being the losers, was that part of the question?
The question, I read it again, it says, restoring the atmosphere will create winners and losers. And Carolyn says that she's willing to bet the losers, the losers, oil and gas industry and agriculture, will have much louder voices. How can we lift up and strengthen the voice of the winners?
Well, I mean, great, really important question. It gets back to this issue of diversity and inclusion, and the fact that poor people, people of color, bear the costs of climate change today more likely, and will in the future. We're already seeing this through mass migration and other things. I mean, I suppose the one lens through which you might see winners and losers is who's going to pay for for restoring the atmosphere. I mean, let's be frank, somebody, us, people around the world, someone is going to pay for that if it's to happen, right? Whether that's through a price on pollution, carbon, through other potential mechanisms, you know, it will be expensive, and it will be more than expensive than if we had spent the money to reduce emissions to start with. But unfortunately, that's where we are. I'm not so sure the oil and gas industry loses, right? I mean, so you know, imagine we paid oil and gas producers, coal producers, we use fossil fuels, I use fossil fuels. We paid them to take higher. If you're an oil and gas producer, you've got a lot of pore space open and available underground, and I'm just to bet we'll be paying fossil fuel companies to put that carbon dioxide and other pollution back underground as well, because they own the pore space. So I'm not so sure that the oil and gas industry will be losing in this proposition. But you know, the point about how to include these other voices, people who don't have the power, the economic power and the voice to you know, to really influence what's happening. You know, we just have to redesign the way we work. I mean, people know about co-design for research and other things. We haven't done a great job of this historically. We've got to do a better job of hearing these people and incorporating their views, because as I've said, our solutions will be stronger and better adopted if we do.
Also, I think that it will help if there's a clear accounting of the cost and benefits, instead of so we all understand the cost of business as usual versus and therefore there may be ways to compensate each other and arrive to some sort of a consensus. So here we have an urban question that Drew Foster presented. How big a role will restoration and planting of forests and canopies in cities and urban areas play in restoring the atmosphere?
I think an important role for several reasons. First of all, we need every arrow in the quiver that we have. And you know, our host, Diane Pataki there in Salt Lake City, has done a lot of work on urban emissions. I could name many other people too. So we need cities to be able to store our carbon. I guess the best way that I think about urban ecology is to look for the synergies, the co-benefits. And so planting trees in cities can store some carbon. That's important, yes, but it can improve air quality. It can reduce heating demands in summer for air conditioning by the shade that the trees provide, and use deciduous trees and you get the sunlight in winter that you need to heat. So by carefully thinking about the science, the energy use, but also the aesthetics, the pleasure that trees and birds and nature around us provide. So I think it's an incredibly important part of the puzzle, perhaps not a large part of the emissions puzzle, but an important one nonetheless, extremely important, because more than half of our population now lives in cities. And so this is the part of nature that most of those people see. We need to enhance that experience and especially think about human health.
Thank you, Rob. There's another question here that says, I'd like to learn more about the Global Carbon Project and the $1 Trillion Tree Initiative. What groups were involved with establishment, and are there shared goals of these projects? Are scientists from other disciplines beyond ecologists contributing? What are the opportunities for others to get involved?
Yeah, there are. The hard part about a two-person discussion like this is there's so much expertise in the audience and the society that I'd love to tap into. But the Trillion Trees Initiative, from my understanding, arose from a couple of different places. It arose partly out of the Greenbelt Initiative in Africa. It arose perhaps in parallel, but also out of conservation groups, the World Wildlife Fund and different groups. And then I mentioned the bond challenge in my plenary talk and such. So a lot of these factors are looking at the landscape, literally and figuratively, of trees, about the benefits for not just storing carbon, but for erosion control, some of the other things I mentioned in the plenary talk. There's plenty of opportunities for you and others to get involved, and that's through the science that you do, but also through whether it be advocacy work, volunteering. So there's plenty of opportunities, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, and also I think that something that I enjoy of your talk is that you pointed out of some trade-offs of afforestation. Is planting trees is not always the free for the environment. I mean, so I think it's, in my case, I think if you can expand about this trade-offs between, there's a nitrogen and water cost for sequestering carbon, and where do we stand in that continuum?
Yeah. If you fertilize a lot of plantations, and some of that nitrogen goes to the atmosphere, as nitrous oxide, that's a potential offset to some of the benefits. I guess I am concerned about an exclusively carbon focus for managing the world. We have 1 billion people who don't have access to clean water. We have lots of other needs, societal goods, inequities out there, and an exclusive sort of maniacal focus on carbon management and can lead us into the wrong direction in some cases.
Yeah, and also we need to understand the different time horizons of different people. There are people that have urgent needs that cannot think about what is going to happen in 20 or 50 years. And we tend to forget about them. And this is certainly civilization crisis, but other people don't have the luxury to think about the civilization because they have very, very urgent short-term problems.
Yeah, and the benefits, the co-benefits of biodiversity conservation and keeping forests from being deforested and restoring them. Again, as I mentioned, I think the biodiversity link and the land link is so critical as we think about using more land potentially for our climate solutions. Not potentially, we will have to use more land.
Mm-hmm. Here, there's a question that has a lot of likes, and it says scientists can shout over more loudly, but the real game-changing action would need government participation. What can be done to influence the policymakers more effectively?
Yeah, really, really important question. I think it isn't just government. It's private sector. It's working within the energy industry. Changing things from within as without. I think each of us has a different boundary, if you will. There's a spectrum of the science that we do, and the extent to which we're willing to communicate that science, work on advocacy. We all have a different place of comfort, and I'm not suggesting that everyone should have the same boundaries that I have. My boundaries are wider than some people's and narrower than others. But I guess I would encourage members, and again, especially our younger members, to get involved. And what I mean by that is decide for yourself what's important to you. If community engagement locally is what's important to you, then dive into that and do it in a sustained way over many years. Plan for that as part of your scholarship and your lifestyle. If it's state level or federal level engagement, talking to the Congress people and senators is great, but the folks who really change things are the staffers. So I'm suggesting that you cultivate relationships with staffers, not to get something from out of them, but to be a resource for them. Be there when they call, when they email. Stop what you're doing and answer them, and try and give them a sincere answer. Tell them when you don't know something, to say, look, I don't know, but here are a couple names of other people who might be able to help you. So really put some time and build those relationships. And I think that kind of activity will bear fruit over your career.
And also, I think it's important to recognize that we're talking about a global problem. So when we think about global problems, we need to think about an array of different countries and political systems. So we talk about, we tend to think about Congress and staffers. That's very, very local, very US centered. But I think if you were in China, it's probably not, they're not staffers, there's no, so we need to sort of broaden our thinking about and you also mentioned the private sector that has an enormous influence and in many ways are more enlightened and they work in longer horizons than at least the US political system that tend to be relatively short term because of its nature. But I think it forces us to think give us a broader perspective. And again, there are here two ecologists talking about world political system, so something that I don't particularly know much, but I think we need to be aware of that, of the differences.
Yeah, I don't know how to influence policy in China. I do hope through some of the measurements that we do and the data and the communications through the Global Carbon Project that information might be useful in China and other countries. But we need people locally who know the best way to influence the system. And I guess I really like your expectation and influence on internationalizing the ESA for that very reason. We need expertise from people in other countries. We need to hear from them. We need to support them and listen to them. And I do feel strongly about the private sector. I mean, there will come a day, there will come a time of reckoning for the disinformation on climate that has happened. But we will need an energy industry. And people who work in the energy industry are not the devil. We need to change that industry from within. We need to change that industry from without through shareholder activities and public pressure and things like that. But climate solutions have to come through the private sector as well. It's just impossible to solve the climate solution without it. So it can't be an us versus them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it is. If it's us versus them, I think we're all going to lose. We're all going to need it. And yeah, I think this is a very interesting discussion, but I think I feel obliged to go to try to cover as many questions than I can. And I think that then this one is going into the same direction. And do you feel critical of the system of capitalism for the perpetuation of extractive practices? Do you think a shift towards a more regenerative system, not capitalism, could benefit atmospheric restoration?
Yeah, I'm not sure well, yes. How about that as an answer? I mean, less extractive, more regenerative, couldn't have said it any better. As to whether it has to be the demise of capitalism, I won't, that's an incredibly important question. That's not a question that I'm willing to grapple with in my professional pursuits, because I'm not willing to wait for solutions to figure out whether or not capitalism is going to rise and fall. If changing capitalism or getting rid of capitalism is what's important to you, then dive in with all your heart. But I can't change the capitalist system or that part of the system that I'm in. I want to work within it and do whatever I can to help the climate problem and solve other environmental problems as well, while we generate fundamental knowledge. So I guess I'm not here to get into the capitalism, no capitalism thing, but dive into what's important for you.
And I also think that something that you said a minute ago in the previous questions, but this is going too fast for me to, is I think when we were talking about the different political systems, we all need to look in the mirror and see try to get our understanding of what our strengths are. And I think we need people who are biogeochemists, we need political scientists, we need activists, we need them all. All of them are needed to restore the atmosphere. And I think I like your call for restoring the atmosphere, but we will need them all. We need political scientists, we need economists, we need humanists, we need poets, we need biogeochemists. But I think that we all need to assess where we can have the largest impact. It would be a mistake if we feel that everybody has have to do the same thing. It will be very difficult for a poet to learn how to work with a mass spectrometer, or so there are not very many people like you that can go from poetry to the global carbon cycle. But I think it's important that each of us try to do what we can contribute the best.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I agree. I think each of us has other things that we're passionate about. I think it's important not to lose those other things. I mean, the job can eat you alive. There's always another paper to be done. There's always something else, and we have to remember to stop and go for a hike, go to the gym. Don't forget that your family matters more. And build that life balance into the work we do. We also have to keep growing. At least I've been fortunate. I love the job that I have. I recognize that the environment's difficult for certain groups. We need to change that. But the freedom that we have intellectually, for those of us in academia, working for agencies, doing consulting, I mean, it's really remarkable what we do. I just finished a sabbatical at the Behavioral Sciences Institute, CASBIS, the Center for Advanced Study on Behavioral Sciences. I was the only, I think it's fair to say, sort of natural or physical scientist there. I went to listen, I went to learn, because of the need to understand behavioral sciences and decision-making, the need to be able to communicate better, understand the science behind those disciplines, understand what we need to do or what motivates people to change behavior. And I went and I listened for a year, basically. Sometimes I didn't understand everything that was being said, but I really went there to learn and had a terrific experience. So I feel strongly about the links between ecology, environmental sciences, and the social science. They're absolutely critical.
I think we have a few more minutes left, and I think I want to go to Chase's question. Do you think we should take the methane budget into account when managing and restoring wetlands? Is there a way to reduce methane emissions from wetlands without compromising their natural functioning, biodiversity, and ecosystem services like water purification? Or is it a bad idea to even consider methane management of wetlands, since wetlands are not the culprit here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there are people, I don't know, Lisa Marie Wyndham, Dennis Baldocchi, we restore wetlands are good for water quality, biodiversity, and climate long term. But when we restore a wetland, put it back temporarily, at least the methane emissions appear to outweigh the much longer term carbon dioxide, the carbon accrual that happens over decades to centuries, that ultimately wins, right? That ultimately makes them carbon positive, makes them climate positive. I don't know of many ways to really think about managing wetland methane emissions. There are some things biogeochemically that we can do. I get a little bit leery, a little bit worried about disseminating things over large areas, over natural systems. I would prefer to start with the things that are more under direct human control. I'd rather work on rice paddies than on wetlands, because we're already managing and using and doing things to rice paddies. Same for animal husbandry and things like that. So I think there are some options for wetlands, but it's harder to manage wetlands across the Mackenzie Delta than it is to manage rice paddies or CAFOs, in my view. So that's why I've tended to steer towards the latter. So
Rob, thank you very, very much. This has been exciting, and your talk was phenomenal, and I think I enjoyed this rapid Q&A with questions that were from capitalism to methane, from chemistry to poetry. So thank you very much, and we encourage everybody to be part of this new experiment of the first fully virtual ESA meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Osvaldo, and really, really appreciate the organizers, the ESA, the staff running this, but especially you for listening. And I really meant what I said. I wish this were a panel and not two of us. And feel free to reach out to me, please, students or anyone else. And really, really thank you for your time, and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.